She had survived enemy fire in 3 different countries. She had crawled through mud and blood while bullets screamed over her head. She had held dying friends in her arms and still completed her missions. But nothing had prepared her for the battle she would face in a quiet courtroom in Virginia, where a man in a black robe would try to take away the only thing that mattered more to her than her own life. Her daughter. When Judge Harold Whitmore looked down at her military record and laughed, asking what kind of ridiculous name Night Fox was supposed to be, he had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his 30-year career. This is the true story of how a single mother and Navy SEAL named Sarah Mitchell brought down one of the most powerful judges in the state and changed the law forever. Sarah Mitchell was born on a cold February morning in 1985 in a small town called Riverside in rural Kentucky. The town had maybe 3,000 people living in it, and most of them worked either in the coal mines or in the small factories that dotted the countryside. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, was a coal miner who had spent 25 years going down into the dark earth every single day. Her mother, Linda Mitchell, worked as a waitress at the only diner in town, a place called Mama's Kitchen where everybody knew everybody and secrets did not stay secrets for very long. Sarah was the middle child of 3. She had an older brother named Michael who was 5 years older than her, and a younger sister named Emma who was 3 years younger. Growing up in that small town was not easy for any of them. Money was always tight. There were months when her parents had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying groceries. Sarah remembered many nights when dinner was just bread and butter because there was nothing else in the house. But, despite all the hardship, Sarah's parents raised their children with strong values. Thomas Mitchell always told his kids that hard work was the only thing that could change your life. He would come home covered in black coal dust, his body aching from 12 hours underground, and still find the energy to help Sarah with her homework. Linda Mitchell taught her children to be kind to everyone, no matter who they were or where they came from. She would give away food to neighbors who had even less than they did, even when they could barely afford to feed themselves. Sarah was different from most girls her age in Riverside. While other girls were playing with dolls and dreaming about princes, Sarah was climbing trees and getting into fights with boys who said girls could not do the things boys could do. She had a fire inside her that nobody could explain. When she was 7 years old, a boy named Billy Tucker told her that girls were weak and could never be as strong as boys. Sarah punched him so hard that she broke his nose. She got suspended from school for 3 days, but when she came home, her father did not yell at her. Instead, he sat her down and said something she would never forget. "Sarah," he said, looking at her with tired but proud eyes, "there will always be people in this world who will tell you what you can and cannot do because you are a woman. Do not ever let them decide your limits. Only you can decide what you are capable of." Those words planted a seed in Sarah's heart that would grow into something powerful over the years. School was not particularly interesting for Sarah. She was smart enough, getting mostly B grades without trying very hard, but she never felt like she belonged in a classroom. The only class she truly loved was physical education. She was faster than most of the boys, stronger than almost all the girls, and had an endurance that amazed her teachers. When she was 12, she started running every morning before school, 5 miles through the hills and valleys around her home. Her mother thought she was crazy for waking up at 5 in the morning to run in the freezing cold, but Sarah loved it. There was something about pushing her body to its limits that made her feel alive. When Sarah was 14, her life changed forever. Her father was caught in a mine collapse. 17 men were trapped underground for 3 days before rescue teams could reach them. Sarah remembered those 3 days as the longest of her life. Her mother did not sleep, did not eat, just sat by the phone waiting for news. When the call finally came that Thomas Mitchell had been found alive, the whole family collapsed in relief. But the joy did not last long. Thomas had survived, but his back was broken. He would never walk properly again. He would never work again. The mining company paid out a small settlement, but it was not nearly enough to support a family of 5. Linda Mitchell had to take on extra shifts at the diner. Michael, who was 19 at the time, dropped out of community college to work at a factory. And Sarah, at just 14 years old, started working part-time at a grocery store after school to help bring in money. Those years were hard. Sarah watched her father, once a strong and proud man, become a shadow of himself. He spent most of his days in a wheelchair, staring out the window at a world he could no longer fully participate in. The pain medication he had to take made him foggy and distant. Sometimes Sarah would come home from school and find him crying, and she did not know what to say or do. She just sat beside him and held his hand. Despite everything, Sarah never let go of her dreams. She did not know exactly what she wanted to do with her life, but she knew one thing for certain. She wanted to prove that she was capable of doing something extraordinary. Something that nobody in her small town had ever done. Something that would make her father proud. The answer came to her when she was 16 years old. She was at the library, one of the few places in town where she could escape from the stress of home life, when she found a book about the Navy SEALs. She had never heard of them before. As she read about their training, their missions, their incredible physical and mental toughness, something clicked inside her. This was what she was meant to do. This was how she would prove herself. But there was a problem. A big one. At that time, women were not allowed to become Navy SEALs. The Special Operations Forces were closed to women. Sarah read this and felt her heart sink. But then, she remembered what her father had told her. Only you can decide what you are capable of. She decided right then and there that she would find a way. No matter how long it took. Sarah graduated from high school in 2003. She was not the valedictorian or anywhere close to it, but she had maintained good enough grades to have options. Her guidance counselor suggested she go to community college, maybe become a nurse or a teacher. Sarah smiled politely and said thank you, but she had already made up her mind. 2 weeks after graduation, Sarah Mitchell walked into the Navy recruitment office in the nearest city. The recruiter, a man named Sergeant Davis, looked at her with surprise. Most of the young people who came through his door were boys looking for adventure or a way to pay for college. Girls were rare, and girls who looked as determined as Sarah was even rarer. "What can I do for you, young lady?" Sergeant Davis asked. "I want to join the Navy," Sarah said. "And, eventually, I want to become a SEAL." Sergeant Davis almost laughed. Almost. But there was something in Sarah's eyes that stopped him. A fire. A certainty. He had been in the military for 20 years and had learned to recognize that look. It was the look of someone who would not be stopped. "You know women cannot be SEALs," he said carefully. "I know," Sarah replied. "But rules change. I will be ready when they do." Sarah enlisted in the Navy in the summer of 2003. Basic training was held in Great Lakes, Illinois, and it was everything Sarah had expected and more. The physical demands were intense. The mental pressure was even worse. Drill instructors screamed in her face, trying to break her spirit. Other recruits dropped out one by one, unable to handle the stress. Sarah never even came close to quitting. She finished basic training in the top 5% of her class. Her instructors noted her exceptional physical fitness, her mental resilience, and her natural leadership abilities. She was recommended for advanced training in combat roles, which at that time were limited for women. Sarah was assigned to a role in Navy intelligence, where she learned skills that would serve her well in the years to come. Languages, analysis, strategic planning. She absorbed everything like a sponge. But Sarah never forgot her ultimate goal. Every day, she trained her body harder than required. She ran extra miles, did extra push-ups, practiced combat techniques whenever she could. She made friends with male sailors who were going through SEAL qualification training and learned from them everything she could about what the selection process was like. In 2005, Sarah was deployed to Iraq. It was her first taste of real combat, and it changed her forever. She was assigned to an intelligence unit that worked closely with special operations teams. She was not supposed to be in the field, but circumstances often put her there anyway. She saw things that most people only saw in nightmares. She lost friends. She took lives. She came close to dying more times than she could count. One night, in a small village outside Fallujah, Sarah's convoy was ambushed. An IED exploded under the vehicle in front of her, killing 3 soldiers instantly. Sarah's vehicle was hit by small arms fire. The driver was wounded. The soldier next to her was hit in the leg and screaming in pain. Without thinking, Sarah took control of the situation. She grabbed the wheel, drove the vehicle to cover, and then went back under enemy fire to drag 2 wounded soldiers to safety. She killed 4 enemy combatants in the process. For her actions that night, Sarah received the Bronze Star with Valor. She was only 20 years old. Her commanding officer wrote in her recommendation that Sarah Mitchell had the heart of a warrior and the mind of a strategist. He noted that it was a shame the Navy did not allow women in combat roles, because Sarah would have made an exceptional SEAL. Sarah served 2 more tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan over the next several years. Each deployment hardened her, taught her more, pushed her closer to the warrior she wanted to become. She earned a reputation among the special operations community as someone who could be trusted in the most dangerous situations. They gave her an unofficial call sign, Night Fox, because of her ability to operate in darkness and her reputation for being silent and deadly. In 2015, everything changed. The Department of Defense announced that all combat roles in the military would be open to women. This included Navy SEALs. Sarah was 30 years old, which was considered old for someone trying to become a SEAL. Most candidates were in their early 20s. But Sarah did not care. She had been waiting for this moment for half her life. She applied for SEAL training immediately. Her application was reviewed carefully. Many people in the Navy were skeptical. No woman had ever completed SEAL training. The attrition rate for men was already over 80%. But Sarah's record spoke for itself. She was accepted into the program. What followed was the hardest 6 months of Sarah's life. SEAL training, officially known as BUD/S, was designed to break people. The physical training was brutal beyond description. Running in soft sand until your legs felt like they would fall off. Swimming in freezing cold ocean water until your body went numb. Carrying heavy logs and boats over your head for hours. And that was just the beginning. The psychological warfare was even worse. Instructors did everything they could to make candidates quit. They insulted them, humiliated them, pushed them past every limit they thought they had. A bell sat in the center of the training compound. All a candidate had to do to quit was ring that bell 3 times. Every day, Sarah heard that bell ring as another candidate gave up. Sarah refused to ring that bell. The most notorious phase of SEAL training is called Hell Week. For 5.5 days, candidates are pushed to their absolute limits with almost no sleep. They run, swim, crawl, and suffer through constant physical challenges while instructors spray them with cold water and blast loud music to disorient them. Most candidates who quit do so during Hell Week. Sarah made it through Hell Week. She was the first woman ever to do so. When she crossed the finish line, her body was so broken that she could barely stand. But she was standing. And she was not alone. 19 other candidates had made it through with her. They were her brothers now, even if they had not always believed in her at the beginning. 6 months after starting BUD/S, Sarah Mitchell became the first female Navy SEAL in history. The news made headlines around the world. She was interviewed by every major news outlet. Politicians praised her. Little girls everywhere saw her picture and dared to dream bigger than they had before. But Sarah did not become a SEAL for the fame or the attention. She became a SEAL because she had a fire inside her that refused to be extinguished. And now that fire would be tested in ways she never expected. After completing her training, Sarah was assigned to SEAL Team 5. She deployed immediately to Syria, where American Special Operations Forces were conducting missions against terrorist organizations. Over the next 2 years, Sarah participated in dozens of missions. She earned 2 more Bronze Stars and a Silver Star for her actions in combat. Her call sign, Night Fox, became legendary within the special operations community. But war takes a toll. not just on the body, but on the soul. Sarah saw terrible things. She did terrible things. Things that were necessary, things that saved lives, but things that haunted her nonetheless. She began to struggle with nightmares. She started drinking more than she should. She felt herself becoming someone she did not recognize. And then, she met Marcus. Marcus Thompson was a civilian contractor working in Syria, helping to rebuild infrastructure in areas that had been liberated from terrorist control. He was tall, handsome, and had the kindest eyes Sarah had ever seen. They met at a base in northeastern Syria, and there was an immediate connection. Marcus was not intimidated by Sarah's reputation or her toughness. He saw through all of that to the woman underneath. Their relationship was complicated. Sarah was still deployed, still going on missions that she could not talk about. Marcus was understanding, patient. He wrote her letters when she was in the field. He was waiting for her every time she came back to base. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she had found something worth fighting for besides her country. In 2019, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. The news shocked her. She had not planned for this. She was not sure she was ready for this. But, when she saw the ultrasound image of her baby, something shifted inside her. All the walls she had built around her heart came crumbling down. She was going to be a mother. Sarah and Marcus decided to get married. It was a small ceremony at the base, with just a few close friends attending. Sarah wore her dress uniform, and Marcus wore a borrowed suit that did not quite fit. It was not fancy, but it was perfect. They decided that Sarah would finish her current deployment and then transition to a training role back in the United States. It was a compromise. Sarah was not ready to leave the SEALs entirely, but she knew she could not keep deploying with a baby at home. Marcus would return to the States ahead of her and get everything ready for their new life. But fate had other plans. 3 weeks before Sarah was scheduled to return home, Marcus was killed. His convoy was hit by a roadside bomb while traveling between two construction sites. He died instantly. Sarah was on a mission when she got the news. She had to finish the mission before she could even process what had happened. When she finally got back to base, she collapsed. The strongest woman in the Navy broke down completely. The next few weeks were a blur of grief and confusion. Sarah had to return to the United States for Marcus's funeral. She was 5 months pregnant, burying the man she loved, and trying to figure out how to go on. Marcus's family was there. They had never fully accepted Sarah, thinking she was not feminine enough, not soft enough to be a good wife and mother. They whispered behind her back at the funeral. Sarah heard them but said nothing. She had nothing left to say. After the funeral, Sarah threw herself into preparing for her baby. She was assigned to a training position in Virginia, teaching hand-to-hand combat to new SEAL candidates. It was not the same as being in the field, but it was something. It gave her a purpose. It helped her get through each day. In September 2019, Sarah gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Hope. Hope Marcus Mitchell. When Sarah held her daughter for the first time, she felt something she had not felt since Marcus died. She felt love. Pure, overwhelming, unconditional love. This tiny person was depending on her. And Sarah swore that she would do anything to protect her. Being a single mother and a Navy SEAL was not easy. Sarah had to balance her training responsibilities with caring for an infant. She had to find childcare she could trust. She had to function on almost no sleep, which actually felt familiar from her military training. But she managed. Because that is what Sarah Mitchell did. She managed. For 2 years, life was hard but stable. Sarah continued teaching at the SEAL training facility. Hope grew into a happy, healthy toddler who had her father's eyes and her mother's stubborn streak. Sarah's fellow SEALs became like uncles to Hope, spoiling her with toys and attention whenever they visited. It was not the life Sarah had imagined, but it was a good life. And then, Marcus's parents filed for custody. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah was just getting home from work, hope balanced on her hip, when she saw the official-looking envelope in her mailbox. She opened it without thinking, expecting some kind of military paperwork. It was a legal notice. Richard and Patricia Thompson, Marcus's parents, were seeking full custody of Hope. They claimed that Sarah was an unfit mother. They claimed that her military career made her unable to properly care for a child. They claimed that Hope would be better off with them. Sarah read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. This could not be happening. These people, who had barely acknowledged Hope's existence for 2 years, were trying to take her daughter away. Sarah called a lawyer that night. Her name was Jennifer Collins, a family law attorney in Virginia Beach who had experience with military custody cases. Jennifer listened to Sarah's story and agreed to take the case. But she warned Sarah that it would not be easy. Custody cases involving military parents are complicated, Jennifer explained. Judges sometimes have biases against mothers who serve in combat roles. And the Thompsons have money. They have connections. This is going to be a fight. Sarah looked at the picture of Hope on her phone. Her daughter was smiling, her face covered in the remnants of the birthday cake Sarah had made for her. That smile was everything. "I've been fighting my whole life," Sarah said quietly. "I can fight this too." What Sarah did not know was that the fight ahead would be unlike anything she had faced before. The enemy would not be terrorists or insurgents. The enemy would be a system that was supposed to protect families. The enemy would be a judge who had already decided that women like Sarah did not deserve to be mothers. His name was Judge Harold Whitmore. And he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The courthouse in Norfolk, Virginia, was an old brick building that had stood for over 100 years. Its walls had seen thousands of cases, thousands of families torn apart and put back together, thousands of lives changed by the decisions made inside its courtrooms. Sarah Mitchell had faced down armed terrorists in multiple countries, but walking up the steps of that courthouse for the first time made her stomach twist with a fear she had never known before. It was a cold morning in March 2022 when Sarah arrived for the first hearing in her custody case. She wore her dress uniform, which her lawyer Jennifer had suggested as a way to remind the court of her service to her country. Her medals gleamed on her chest. Her shoes were polished to a mirror shine. But none of that mattered to her. What mattered was the picture of Hope she carried in her pocket, the one she touched every time she felt her courage slipping. Jennifer Collins was waiting for her at the entrance. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She had been practicing family law for 25 years and had seen just about everything. But even she looked worried that morning. "There's something you should know before we go in," Jennifer said, pulling Sarah aside. "I found out last night that our case has been assigned to Judge Harold Whitmore." Sarah did not recognize the name. Is that good or bad? Jennifer's expression told her everything she needed to know. It's not good. Whitmore is known for being old-fashioned. Very old-fashioned. He has a history of ruling against mothers who work outside the home. Against military mothers especially. He believes children belong with their grandparents rather than with single working mothers. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. "So he's already decided I'm going to lose." "Not necessarily. But we need to be prepared for an uphill battle. Everything you say, everything you do in that courtroom, needs to be perfect. Whitmore is looking for any excuse to rule against you. We cannot give him one." Sarah nodded slowly, absorbing the information. She had been in situations where the odds were stacked against her before. This was just another mission. Another enemy to outmaneuver. She would find a way. The courtroom was smaller than Sarah had expected. Dark wood paneling covered the walls. A large American flag hung behind the judge's bench. A few people sat in the gallery, mostly court staff and what looked like law students observing for class credit. Richard and Patricia Thompson were already seated at the plaintiff's table with their lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit named William Hartford. Sarah recognized her in-laws immediately. Richard Thompson was in his early 70s, with white hair and a permanent frown etched into his face. He had been a corporate executive before retiring, and he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who had spent his whole life giving orders and having them obeyed. Patricia was a few years younger than her husband, immaculately dressed in designer clothes, her face frozen in an expression that might have been disapproval or might have just been too much cosmetic surgery. Neither of them looked at Sarah as she entered. Sarah and Jennifer took their seats at the defendant's table. They had barely gotten settled when the bailiff called for everyone to rise. A door behind the bench opened, and Judge Harold Whitmore entered the courtroom. Sarah's first impression was that Whitmore looked like a caricature of an old-fashioned judge. He was heavy-set, with jolly cheeks and small eyes that seemed to disapprove of everything they saw. His black robe was slightly wrinkled, and he moved with the slow deliberation of someone who enjoyed making people wait for him. When he sat down and looked out over the courtroom, his gaze landed on Sarah. Something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked uncomfortably like contempt. "This court is now in session," the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Harold Whitmore presiding. The matter before us is Thompson v. Mitchell, case number 2022 CV 4475, regarding custody of the minor child Hope Mitchell. Judge Whitmore shuffled some papers on his desk. "I have reviewed the preliminary filings from both parties. Mr. Hartford, you may present the petitioner's argument." William Hartford rose smoothly to his feet. He was probably 40 years old, tan and confident, with the practiced ease of someone who spent most of his time in courtrooms. "Thank you, Your Honor. My clients, Richard and Patricia Thompson, are the paternal grandparents of Hope Mitchell. They are seeking full custody of their grandchild because they believe the child's mother, Sarah Mitchell, is unable to provide a stable and safe environment for her care." Sarah felt her fingernails digging into her palms. She forced herself to keep her expression neutral. Hartford continued. "The respondent is a member of the United States Navy. Specifically, she is a member of the Navy SEALs, a combat unit that regularly deploys to dangerous locations around the world. Her schedule is unpredictable. Her work is inherently dangerous. She could be called away at any moment, leaving her daughter without a parent." "Objection," Jennifer said, standing up. "The nature of Lieutenant Commander Mitchell's work is being mischaracterized. She currently serves in a training capacity and has not deployed since before her daughter's birth." "I will allow Mr. Hartford to continue," Judge Whitmore said, waving Jennifer back into her seat. "You will have your opportunity to respond." Hartford nodded his thanks to the judge and continued. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have concerns about the respondent's mental fitness. She has been exposed to significant combat trauma. She has witnessed death and violence. We believe this has affected her ability to provide a nurturing environment for a young child." Sarah felt her blood boiling. They were using her service, her sacrifice, against her. Everything she had done for her country was being twisted into a weapon to take her daughter away. "My clients, on the other hand," Hartford said, gesturing toward the Thompsons, "can provide a stable, loving home. They are retired and have the time and resources to devote to Hope's care. They have a beautiful home and a safe neighborhood with excellent schools. They can provide the kind of nurturing environment that every child deserves." Judge Whitmore was nodding along as Hartford spoke. Sarah noticed that he had not nodded once during Jennifer's objection. "Thank you, Mr. Hartford," the judge said. "Ms. Collins, your response." Jennifer stood up. "Your Honor, my client is one of the most decorated service members in the United States military. She has served her country with distinction for nearly 20 years. She has made sacrifices that most people cannot even imagine. And she has done all of this while being an exceptional mother to her daughter." Jennifer walked toward the center of the courtroom. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell has been Hope's primary caregiver since birth. She has arranged her military career specifically to be able to care for her daughter. She has a network of support, including other service members who are like family. Hope is happy, healthy, and thriving. The petitioners are asking this court to uproot a child from her mother, the only parent she has ever known, based on speculation and prejudice. They have no evidence that my client is an unfit mother. They simply believe that a woman who serves in combat cannot also be a good parent. That belief is not only wrong, it is insulting to every military mother who has ever served. Sarah saw Judge Whitmore's eyes narrow at Jennifer's words. He clearly did not appreciate being told that he might hold prejudiced beliefs. I have read the respondent's service record, Judge Whitmore said slowly. It is certainly impressive. Although I must say, some of it seems quite unusual. For example, I see a reference to a call sign. Night Fox. He pronounced the words with obvious disdain. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Jennifer started to answer, but Sarah stood up before she could. If I may speak, Your Honor? Judge Whitmore looked surprised. The respondent may address the court. Sarah stepped forward, her posture straight, her voice calm and clear. A call sign is a nickname given to members of special operations units. It is used for communication purposes during missions. My call sign is Night Fox because I specialize in night operations and because I am known for being quick and quiet when moving through hostile territory. The judge's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. Night Fox, he repeated. How very theatrical. Tell me, Mrs. Mitchell, do you think playing at being a soldier is an appropriate role model for a young girl? Sarah felt the insult hit her like a physical blow. Playing at being a soldier. This man knew nothing about what she had done, what she had sacrificed. But she kept her composure. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her angry. I am not playing at anything, Your Honor. I am a Navy SEAL. I have served my country in combat for over a decade. I have killed enemies of the United States and saved the lives of American soldiers. My service is not theater. It is real. Judge Whitmore's expression did not change. Yes, well. We shall see how relevant your military experience is to the matter of raising a child. Please be seated. Sarah returned to her seat, her heart pounding. Jennifer put a hand on her arm, a gesture of support, but also a warning. Do not let him get to you. The hearing continued for another 2 hours. Hartford called witnesses who testified to the Thompsons' good character and their ability to provide for hope. A neighbor talked about how safe and quiet their community was. A family friend described Patricia's devotion to her grandchildren from her other son. Everything was designed to paint a picture of a perfect alternative to what they claimed was Sarah's unstable life. When it was Jennifer's turn, she called witnesses of her own. A Navy captain testified about Sarah's exceptional record and her dedication to her daughter. The woman who ran the child care center Hope attended talked about what a happy, well-adjusted child Hope was and how obviously she loved her mother. A psychologist who specialized in military families explained that there was no evidence that combat service made someone a worse parent. But Sarah could see that Judge Whitmore was not really listening to her witnesses. He checked his watch multiple times during the captain's testimony. He whispered something to his clerk during the psychologist's testimony, clearly not paying attention. When Jennifer's witnesses spoke about Sarah's qualities as a mother, the judge's expression remained skeptical, almost bored. At the end of the hearing, Judge Whitmore announced that he would take the matter under consideration and issue a ruling within 30 days. He banged his gavel and left the courtroom without making eye contact with Sarah. Outside the courthouse, Sarah stood on the steps and tried to breathe. The cold air hurt her lungs, but at least it was real. At least it was something she could feel. That went about as well as we could have hoped, Jennifer said, though her tone suggested otherwise. He has already made up his mind, Sarah replied. You saw how he looked at me. He thinks I am some kind of freak for being a female SEAL. He probably thinks women should stay home and cook dinner. Jennifer sighed. Whitmore is old-fashioned, yes. But the law is on our side. You are Hope's mother. You have been her primary caregiver since birth. There is no evidence of abuse or neglect. Even a biased judge has to follow the law. Sarah wanted to believe that. But she had seen the way Whitmore looked at her witnesses, the way he dismissed their testimony with barely concealed contempt. This was not going to be a fair fight. The next 30 days were the longest of Sarah's life. She tried to continue with her normal routine. She went to work, taught combat techniques to new SEAL candidates, came home, and spent every possible moment with hope. But the uncertainty hung over everything like a dark cloud. At night, after Hope was asleep, Sarah would sit in the quiet of her small apartment and think about what she would do if she lost. Where would she go? How would she cope? She had survived war, survived the death of her husband, survived things that would have broken most people. But losing her daughter? That was something she did not know if she could survive. 3 weeks after the hearing, Sarah received a call from Jennifer. The judge had made his decision early. "I need you to come to my office," Jennifer said. Her voice was strange, flat in a way that made Sarah's stomach drop. Sarah drove to Jennifer's office in a daze. The whole way there, she told herself that it would be okay. The law was on her side. Jennifer had said so. She was Hope's mother. No judge could take that away. But when she walked into Jennifer's office and saw the look on her lawyer's face, she knew. "He ruled against us," Jennifer said. She handed Sarah a stack of papers. "Temporary custody of Hope is being awarded to the Thompsons, effective in 7 days. There will be a final hearing in 3 months to determine permanent custody." Sarah stared at the papers in her hands. The words blurred together. Temporary custody. 7 days. Her hands were shaking so badly that she nearly dropped the documents. "He cannot do this," she whispered. "This is my daughter. My daughter." "I know," Jennifer said. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I am so sorry, Sarah. This is wrong. Whitmore's ruling ignores established law, ignores precedent, ignores everything. He has let his personal biases override his judicial responsibilities. Then, we appeal. We fight this. We do whatever it takes." Jennifer nodded. "We will appeal." "Absolutely. But the appeal process takes time. Months, possibly longer. And, in the meantime, the temporary custody order stands." Sarah felt like the room was spinning. In 7 days, she would have to hand her daughter over to people who had never shown Hope any love, people who were doing this not because they cared about Hope but because they wanted to hurt Sarah. They had never forgiven her for not being the kind of wife they thought their son deserved. This was their revenge. "There has to be something else we can do," Sarah said. "Something faster. Something that can stop this before it happens." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "There might be one thing. But it is risky. Very risky." "Tell me." "Judge Whitmore has been on the bench for 30 years. In that time, there have been complaints about him. Several complaints, actually. Claims that he is biased against military mothers. Claims that he rules based on his personal beliefs rather than the law. But nothing has ever come of those complaints because he is well connected politically. He has powerful friends. What are you suggesting?" Jennifer looked at Sarah carefully. "I am suggesting that you are not the only person Judge Whitmore has wronged. If we could find other women who have been treated unfairly by him, if we could show a pattern of bias, we might be able to get his ruling overturned. We might even be able to get him removed from the bench." It was a long shot. Sarah knew that. But it was something. It was a mission. Something she could do instead of just waiting helplessly while her world fell apart. "How do I find these other women?" Sarah asked. "Court records are public. I can pull every custody case Whitmore has ruled on involving military mothers. If there are patterns, we will find them." Sarah nodded. "Do it. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. I am not going to let that man take my daughter." Over the next several days, Sarah threw herself into the fight. While Jennifer researched court records, Sarah reached out to military networks, veterans groups, anyone who might know of women who had been treated unfairly by Judge Whitmore. She made phone calls, sent emails, talked to everyone who would listen. At first, the responses were discouraging. Most people had never heard of Judge Whitmore. Those who had heard of him were afraid to speak out. He was a powerful man with powerful friends. Going against him could mean trouble. But, slowly, stories began to emerge. First, there was Maria Gonzalez, an Army helicopter pilot who had lost custody of her twin sons to her ex-husband's parents 3 years earlier. Her case had been handled by Judge Whitmore. The ruling had been almost identical to Sarah's, based on the same arguments about military mothers being unable to provide stable environments. Then, there was Angela Williams, a Marine Corps Staff Sergeant who had fought for 2 years to get custody of her daughter back after Whitmore awarded temporary custody to her ex-husband. The ruling had been based partly on testimony that Angela's service in Iraq had given her PTSD, even though her military records showed no such diagnosis. Then, there was Lisa Chen, a Navy nurse who had lost her daughter to her deceased husband's parents in a case that mirrored Sarah's almost exactly. Lisa had given up fighting after exhausting her savings on legal fees. She had not seen her daughter in 4 years. One by one, Sarah collected their stories. Each one made her angrier. Each one made her more determined. This was not just about her anymore. This was about all of them. All the women who had served their country and been punished for it. All the mothers who had been separated from their children by a man who believed that military service made women unfit to be parents. By the time the 7 days were up, Sarah had documented over a dozen cases. 12 women, 12 families torn apart, 12 children separated from their mothers. All by the same judge. All using the same biased reasoning. But, she had run out of time. The morning Sarah had to hand Hope over to the Thompsons was gray and cold, with a light rain falling that seemed to match her mood. A social worker came to her apartment to supervise the transfer. Sarah had spent the whole night before holding Hope, memorizing her face, her smell, the sound of her laughter. Hope did not understand what was happening. She was only 2.5 years old. When Sarah handed her to the social worker, Hope started crying, reaching back toward her mother. Sarah watched her daughter being carried away, and something inside her broke. But, even as her heart shattered, a new emotion rose up to take the place of her grief. Rage. Pure, focused rage. Judge Harold Whitmore had taken her daughter. He had done the same thing to a dozen other women. And, he had done it because he believed he was untouchable. He was wrong. That night, Sarah sat down at her computer and started writing. She wrote about her story, about the other women's stories, about Judge Whitmore's pattern of bias against military mothers. She wrote with a clarity and precision that came from years of military training. Every claim was documented. Every allegation was supported by evidence. When she was finished, she sent the document to everyone she could think of. News reporters. Military advocacy groups. Women's rights organizations. Politicians. Anyone who might listen. Anyone who might help. Then, she waited. She did not have to wait long. Within 48 hours, her story had gone viral. A reporter from a major newspaper called. Then, another. Then, a television producer. Within a week, Sarah's story was national news. The narrative was impossible to resist, a decorated war hero, the first female Navy SEAL, fighting to keep her daughter against a judge who seemed to believe that women who served in combat were unfit to be mothers. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with support for Sarah. Veterans groups organized protests outside the courthouse. Politicians who had never cared about military custody issues suddenly started making statements. A hashtag started trending, #JusticeForNightFox. But, the most important development came from an unexpected source. Judge Whitmore's clerk, a young woman named Rebecca Martinez, reached out to Jennifer Collins through a mutual contact. She had been working for Whitmore for 3 years, and she had seen things. Things that she had kept quiet about because she was afraid of losing her job. But Sarah's story had inspired her to come forward. Rebecca had evidence. Emails between Judge Whitmore and the Thompsons' lawyer, William Hartford, that showed the two men were personal friends. Evidence that Whitmore had discussed the case with Hartford before the hearing even began. Evidence that the judge had already made up his mind to rule against Sarah before hearing a single word of testimony. It was exactly what Sarah needed. Jennifer filed an emergency motion with the state appeals court, presenting all of the evidence they had gathered. The documented pattern of bias. The communications between Whitmore and Hartford. The testimony from Rebecca Martinez. Everything. The appeals court moved faster than anyone expected. Within 10 days, they had issued a ruling. Judge Harold Whitmore's custody order was immediately overturned. Furthermore, the court found that Whitmore had engaged in serious judicial misconduct. His cases were being reviewed. He was being suspended pending an investigation. And, most importantly, temporary custody of Hope was being returned to Sarah Mitchell. The day Sarah got Hope back was the happiest day of her life. She drove to the Thompsons' house with a court order and 2 police officers, just in case. Richard Thompson tried to claim the court had made a mistake. But the officers were not interested in his arguments. They were there to enforce the law. Hope came running out of the house the moment she saw her mother. She was crying, but this time they were happy tears. Sarah scooped her daughter up and held her so tight that she thought she might never let go. "Mama," Hope said, burying her face in Sarah's neck. "Mama came back." "I will always come back," Sarah whispered. "Always. No matter what." As she carried Hope to her car, Sarah looked back at the Thompson house. Richard and Patricia were standing in the doorway, their faces twisted with anger and disbelief. Sarah felt no satisfaction in their defeat. She felt only relief that her daughter was safe. But the fight was not over yet. The final custody hearing was still scheduled. The Thompsons had not given up. And, while Judge Whitmore was suspended, Sarah knew that the system that had allowed him to abuse his power for 30 years was still in place. There was still work to be done. Still battles to fight. But, for now, in this moment, Sarah had her daughter back. That was enough. For now, that was everything. The weeks following Hope's return were a strange mix of joy and anxiety. Sarah held her daughter close every chance she got, as if she could protect her from the world by the sheer force of her love. But she knew that the legal battle was far from over. The Thompsons had money, connections, and a burning desire to take Hope away from her. They were not going to give up just because one judge had been suspended. Jennifer Collins called Sarah into her office on a Tuesday morning in late April. The spring sun was shining outside, but inside the lawyer's office, the mood was serious. Jennifer had dark circles under her eyes, the kind that came from too many late nights studying case files and legal precedents. "The Thompsons have hired a new legal team," Jennifer said, sliding a folder across her desk. 3 lawyers from the biggest family law firm in the state. They are not messing around anymore. Sarah opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. The names meant nothing to her, but the billing rates made her eyes widen. These lawyers charged more per hour than she earned in a day. This was going to be a war of attrition, and the Thompsons had far deeper pockets than she did. How are they justifying continuing the case after everything that happened with Whitmore? Sarah asked. Jennifer sighed. They are arguing that Whitmore's misconduct does not change the fundamental facts of the case. They still claim you are unfit to be a mother because of your military service. They have filed new motions, requested new psychological evaluations, and they are pushing for an expedited hearing date. When? 6 weeks from now. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. 6 weeks was not a lot of time to prepare for a case this complex. Especially when the other side had unlimited resources and she was already stretched thin between work, caring for Hope, and dealing with the media attention that had not died down. But Sarah had never backed down from a fight in her life. She was not going to start now. What do we need to do? She asked. Everything, Jennifer replied. We need more evidence. We need expert witnesses. We need character references. We need to be prepared for every possible attack they might throw at us. And we need money, Sarah. A lot of it. These lawyers are expensive, and I am doing what I can to keep my own fees reasonable, but there are limits to what I can absorb. Sarah nodded slowly. She had some savings, but not enough to fund a prolonged legal battle against a team of high-priced lawyers. She had already taken out a loan to cover the costs so far. Going deeper into debt felt like walking into a trap, but what choice did she have? I will figure out the money, Sarah said. You focus on the legal strategy. We are going to win this. Jennifer looked at her client with a mixture of admiration and concern. I know you have been through things that most people cannot imagine. But this is different from combat, Sarah. This is going to be a slow, grinding fight. It is going to test you in ways that are different from anything you have faced before. Are you ready for that? Sarah thought about hope, about the way her daughter's face lit up every morning when she saw her mother. She thought about all the women whose stories she had collected, all the mothers who had lost their children to a system that was supposed to protect them. She thought about what she was fighting for, not just for herself, but for all of them. I have been getting ready for this my whole life, Sarah said quietly. I just did not know it until now. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Sarah threw herself into preparing for the hearing with the same intensity she had brought to every military mission. She gathered documents, coordinated with witnesses, and spent hours going over legal strategy with Jennifer. At the same time, she continued working her day job training SEAL candidates, continued caring for Hope, continued trying to maintain some semblance of normal life. The media attention was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it kept pressure on the system, made it harder for anyone to sweep what had happened with Judge Whitmore under the rug. On the other hand, it attracted unwanted attention. Sarah started receiving hate mail from people who thought she had no business being in the military, let alone raising a child. Some of the messages were ugly enough that she reported them to the police. But the hate was far outweighed by the support. Thousands of people reached out to express their admiration for Sarah and their outrage at how she had been treated. Veterans groups organized fundraisers to help with her legal expenses. Women's advocacy organizations offered resources and connections. Complete strangers sent money, sometimes just a few dollars, sometimes thousands. A GoFundMe campaign started by a group of military wives raised over $200,000 in the first 2 weeks. Most touching of all were the messages from other military mothers who had faced similar battles. Women who had been separated from their children, who had been told they were unfit because they chose to serve their country. Some had won their fights. Others had not. But all of them found hope in Sarah's story, hope that maybe things could change. Sarah tried to respond to as many messages as she could, but there were simply too many. She felt overwhelmed by the responsibility that had been placed on her shoulders. She had not asked to become a symbol, had not wanted to be the face of a movement. All she had wanted was to raise her daughter in peace. But circumstances had pushed her onto a larger stage, and she could not walk away from it now. One evening, about 3 weeks before the hearing, Sarah received a phone call that changed everything. She was sitting in her living room, Hope asleep on her lap after a long day of playing at the park. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally she would have let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. Is this Sarah Mitchell? The voice was female, professional, with a hint of warmth underneath the formality. This is she. Who is calling? My name is Patricia Hayes. I am a producer at CNN. I would like to talk to you about doing an interview. Sarah had turned down dozens of interview requests over the past few weeks. She did not want to turn her family tragedy into entertainment, did not want to parade her pain in front of cameras for ratings. But there was something about Patricia's voice that made her hesitate. I appreciate the interest, Sarah said carefully, but I have been avoiding media appearances. I do not want to turn this into a circus. I completely understand, Patricia replied. And I am not looking to exploit your situation. But I think your story deserves to be told in full, not in sound bites or headlines, but as a complete narrative. What you are going through is not just about one custody case. It is about how our country treats the women who serve in uniform. I think we can tell that story in a way that helps people understand, that maybe even changes some minds. Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Patricia waited patiently, not pushing. What would the interview involve? Sarah finally asked. A sit-down conversation with one of our anchors. Nothing sensational, just an honest discussion about your experiences. We would talk about your military service, the custody battle, Judge Whitmore, and what you hope the outcome will be. We would air it as a special segment, probably 30 minutes or so. You would have final approval over which parts we use. Final approval was important. Sarah had heard too many stories about people who gave interviews only to have their words twisted and taken out of context. The promise of control over the final product made her feel slightly better. Can I think about it? Sarah asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. But, just so you know, we would need to film within the next week or so if we want to air it before your hearing. I think public attention on this could help your case. Sarah knew Patricia was right. Public pressure had already helped overturn Judge Whitmore's ruling. More attention could make it harder for the system to rule against her again. But it could also backfire. It could make her look like she was trying to win in the court of public opinion rather than the actual court. It was a calculated risk. I will let you know by tomorrow, Sarah said. After hanging up, Sarah sat in the quiet living room, Hope still sleeping peacefully in her lap. She thought about her daughter, about the life she wanted to give her. She thought about all the other mothers who were fighting similar battles in silence, without cameras or support or hope. Maybe this was not just about her. Maybe using her platform to speak out could help others. The next morning, Sarah called Patricia Hayes back and agreed to the interview. The filming took place 4 days later at Sarah's apartment. A crew of about 10 people transformed her modest living room into a makeshift television studio, with lights and cameras and microphones everywhere. Hope was being watched by a fellow SEAL's wife for the day, which Sarah was grateful for. She did not want her daughter anywhere near the chaos. The interviewer was a woman named Catherine Brooks, a veteran journalist known for her tough but fair style. She arrived early and spent half an hour talking with Sarah off camera, getting to know her, putting her at ease. By the time the cameras started rolling, Sarah felt as comfortable as she was going to get. The interview started with the basics. Sarah's childhood, her decision to join the Navy, her path to becoming the first female SEAL. Catherine was clearly familiar with the story, but she let Sarah tell it in her own words, asking follow-up questions that showed genuine interest rather than just checking boxes. Then, they got to the harder parts. Marcus's death. Finding out she was pregnant. Becoming a single mother while still serving in one of the most demanding roles in the military. You had options, Catherine said gently. You could have left the SEALs, taken a civilian job, had an easier life. Why did you stay? Sarah took a moment to gather her thoughts. Because being a SEAL is not just what I do. It is who I am. I worked my entire life to get to where I am. I am not going to give that up just because it is hard. And, honestly, I think it makes me a better mother, not a worse one. I want my daughter to see that women can do anything they set their minds to. I want her to know that strength and love are not opposites. Catherine nodded, making a note. Tell me about Judge Whitmore. What was it like being in his courtroom? Sarah's expression hardened at the memory. It was clear from the beginning that he had already made up his mind. He looked at me like I was something unnatural. When he asked about my call sign, Night Fox, he said it like it was a joke. Like everything I had accomplished was some kind of performance. He mocked you? He mocked my service. He mocked what I represent. And he did it because he does not believe women belong in combat roles. He does not believe we can be warriors and mothers at the same time. His bias affected his judgment, and, because of that, my daughter was taken from me. But, you got her back? Yes. Because I refused to accept what he did. Because other women came forward with their own stories. Because his clerk had the courage to expose the truth about how he was conducting his cases. I got Hope back, but there are so many other mothers who did not have those advantages. So many children who are still separated from their mothers because of judges like Whitmore. Catherine leaned forward slightly. What do you want people to take away from your story? Sarah looked directly into the camera. I want people to understand that military mothers are not a special category of parent. We are just mothers who happen to serve our country. The sacrifices we make do not diminish our ability to love and care for our children. If anything, they enhance it. We know what it means to fight for something bigger than ourselves. We know what it means to put duty above personal comfort. Those are exactly the values I want to pass on to my daughter. And, what about the upcoming hearing? What are you expecting? Sarah paused. I am expecting a fight. The people trying to take my daughter have money and power and connections. They are not going to give up easily. But, neither am I. I am going to fight with everything I have, not just for Hope, but for every mother who has been told she is not good enough because she chose to serve. The interview went on for another hour, covering topics ranging from PTSD among female veterans to proposed legislation protecting military parents' custody rights. By the time it was over, Sarah was emotionally drained but also strangely energized. She had told her truth to the world. Whatever happened next, at least people would know her side of the story. The interview aired the following Thursday evening, just 9 days before Sarah's custody hearing. The response was immediate and massive. Within hours, clips from the interview were everywhere on social media. Sarah's words about military mothers being warriors and mothers at the same time became a rallying cry. The hashtag #NightFox trended nationwide. But the most significant response came from an unexpected place. The morning after the interview aired, Sarah received a call from a number with a Washington, D.C. area code. When she answered, a woman's voice introduced herself as a legislative aide for a United States senator. Senator Williams would like to meet with you, the aide said. She has been following your case and is very interested in discussing potential legislation to protect military parents in custody disputes. Would you be available to come to Washington next week? Sarah was stunned. Senator Elizabeth Williams was one of the most powerful women in Congress, a former military officer herself who had championed veterans' causes throughout her career. An audience with her could change everything. Yes, Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I will be there. The meeting was scheduled for the Monday before Sarah's custody hearing. It meant traveling to Washington when she should probably have been preparing for court, but Jennifer agreed that the opportunity was too important to pass up. If legislation was introduced protecting military parents, it could change not just Sarah's case but thousands of others. Sarah flew to Washington on Sunday night, leaving Hope with the same family that had watched her during the interview. The flight was short but gave her time to think about what she would say, how she could best represent all the mothers who were counting on her. Senator Williams's office was in the Russell Senate Office Building, a massive white marble structure that radiated power and history. Sarah felt out of place in her civilian clothes, surrounded by staffers in suits and politicians in expensive ties. But she reminded herself that she had walked into far more dangerous places than this. The senator herself was exactly what Sarah had expected. Elizabeth Williams was in her early 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She had served 20 years in the army before entering politics, rising to the rank of colonel. She understood what it meant to be a woman in a man's world. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, the senator said, rising to shake Sarah's hand. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. They talked for over an hour. Sarah told her story again, but this time focusing on the systemic issues rather than her personal experience. She talked about the research Jennifer had done showing how many military mothers faced similar biases in family courts. She talked about the need for consistent standards across jurisdictions, for training judges on the realities of military family life, for protections that would prevent what happened to her from happening to others. Senator Williams listened intently, asking pointed questions and taking notes. When Sarah finished, the senator was quiet for a long moment. "What you have described," she finally said, "is not just a legal problem. It is a moral failure. Our country asks young men and women to make extraordinary sacrifices in its defense. The least we can do is ensure that those sacrifices are not used against them when they try to raise their families." "I agree completely," Sarah said. "I am going to introduce legislation," the senator continued. "A bill that establishes federal standards for custody cases involving military parents. It will require judges to undergo training on military family issues. It will prohibit deployment or combat service from being used as evidence of parental unfitness. And it will create an expedited appeals process for military parents who believe they have been treated unfairly." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. This was bigger than she had dared to hope for. "Senator, I do not know what to say." "Thank you." Senator Williams smiled. "Do not thank me yet. Getting a bill through Congress is never easy. But, with your help, with your voice, I think we can make it happen. Are you willing to testify before the Veterans Affairs Committee?" "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." "Good. Because this fight is just beginning. What you have done so far is remarkable, but changing the law will require even more. More attention, more pressure, more voices speaking up. Are you ready for that?" Sarah thought about hope, about all the mothers she had come to know through this ordeal, about the world she wanted her daughter to grow up in. A world where women could serve their country without fear of losing their children. A world where judges like Harold Whitmore could no longer abuse their power unchecked. "I am ready," she said. "I have been ready my whole life." The meeting ended with a handshake and a promise. Senator Williams would announce the legislation the day after Sarah's custody hearing, regardless of the outcome. Sarah would be there for the announcement, would testify before Congress, would do whatever was necessary to make this law a reality. Flying back to Virginia that night, Sarah felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not just her daughter, but the emotion itself. The sense that things could actually get better, that her struggles could lead to meaningful change. The custody hearing was only 4 days away. The battle for hope was about to reach its climax. But, whatever happened in that courtroom, Sarah knew now that her fight had grown beyond her own family. She was fighting for something bigger. And she was not alone. As the plane descended through the clouds toward home, Sarah closed her eyes and allowed herself, just for a moment, to imagine victory. Not just winning custody, but changing the system itself. Making sure that no mother would ever have to go through what she had gone through. It was a big dream. Maybe too big. But, then, again, everyone had said a woman could never become a Navy SEAL. Sarah Mitchell had proven them wrong once. She was about to prove them wrong again. The morning of the final custody hearing arrived with a cold rain that seemed to match the gravity of the day. Sarah woke up before dawn, unable to sleep, and spent an hour just watching Hope breathe in her small bed. Her daughter's face was peaceful, innocent, unaware of the battle that would determine her future. Sarah memorized every detail, the way Hope's eyelashes rested against her cheeks, the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth even in sleep, the gentle rise and fall of her chest. This was what she was fighting for. Not revenge against the Thompsons, not vindication against a system that had wronged her, but simply the right to continue being Hope's mother. To watch her grow up, to be there for her first day of school, her first heartbreak, her first triumph. All the ordinary miracles of parenthood that most people took for granted. Jennifer Collins picked Sarah up at 7 o'clock sharp. The lawyer looked exhausted but determined, her briefcase stuffed with documents and notes. They had prepared for every possible scenario, every argument the Thompsons' legal team might throw at them. But, as they drove through the gray morning toward the courthouse, Sarah could not shake the feeling that something unexpected was going to happen. "I got a call last night," Jennifer said as they waited at a red light. From William Hartford. Sarah's attention sharpened. Hartford was the Thompsons' original lawyer, the one who had been friends with Judge Whitmore. After the scandal broke, the Thompsons had fired him and hired the expensive new legal team. What did he want? He wanted to talk. Off the record. He seemed nervous, scared even. He said there were things about the Thompsons that would come out eventually, things that would change how people saw this case. Did he give any details? Jennifer shook her head. He hung up before I could ask. I think he was testing the waters, seeing if I was interested in what he had to say. Whatever he knows, it is important enough that he is willing to risk his career to share it. Sarah considered this. Hartford had everything to lose by turning against his former clients. If he was reaching out now, something must have pushed him to it. What do you think it means? I think it means the Thompsons have secrets they do not want exposed. And I think Hartford might be willing to help us expose them, if the price is right. What would the price be? Probably immunity from any legal consequences related to his dealings with Judge Whitmore. Maybe protection if the Thompsons try to retaliate against him. He is a man who sees the writing on the wall and wants to make sure he ends up on the winning side. The courthouse loomed ahead, its old brick facade dark and imposing in the rain. Television cameras and reporters were clustered near the entrance, held back by police barriers. Sarah's case had become national news, and everyone wanted to see how it would end. Jennifer pulled into the parking garage to avoid the media circus. As they walked toward the building through a side entrance, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Tell your lawyer to meet me in the coffee shop across the street after the morning session. I have evidence that will end this case today. Sarah showed the message to Jennifer. Hartford, Jennifer said immediately. He wants to meet. Should I go? Yes, Sarah said. Whatever he has, we need it. The courtroom was already packed when they entered. The Thompsons sat at the plaintiff's table with their new legal team, 3 lawyers in matching dark suits who looked like they had stepped out of a corporate advertisement. Richard Thompson's face was set in its usual frown, but Sarah noticed something different about Patricia. The older woman looked tired, worried in a way Sarah had never seen before. Her makeup could not quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. The new judge assigned to the case was named Martha Rodriguez. She was in her 50s, with a reputation for fairness and a no-nonsense approach to the law. Unlike Whitmore, she had no history of bias against military parents. Jennifer considered her assignment a positive development, though she warned Sarah that fair did not necessarily mean favorable. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Martha Rodriguez presiding. Judge Rodriguez entered and took her seat with efficient grace. Her eyes swept the courtroom, taking in the packed gallery, the media presence, the tension that hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Please be seated, she said. We are here for the matter of Thompson v. Mitchell, case number 2022 CV 4475. This is a hearing to determine permanent custody of the minor child Hope Mitchell. I have reviewed all filings from both parties and am prepared to hear arguments. Let us begin. The Thompsons' lead attorney, a man named Gregory Winters, rose first. He was tall and silver-haired, with the polished manner of someone who had argued cases in front of judges for decades. Your Honor, my clients seek custody of their grandchild because they believe it is in the child's best interest. The respondent, while accomplished in her military career, leads a lifestyle that is fundamentally incompatible with raising a young child. Her work is dangerous and unpredictable. Her psychological state, given her exposure to combat trauma, raises serious concerns. My clients, in contrast, can provide a stable, secure, and nurturing environment. Judge Rodriguez listened without expression. Go on. We will present testimony from child development experts who will explain the importance of stability in early childhood. We will present evidence showing that the respondent's living situation, while adequate, cannot match the resources and attention my clients can provide. And we will present testimony regarding the respondent's mental health that we believe will be of concern to this court. Sarah felt her jaw tighten at the mention of mental health testimony. She had undergone psychological evaluations as part of the case, and all of them had found her to be in excellent mental health. The Thompsons were grasping at straws, trying to paint her service to her country as a mental defect. Jennifer rose to respond. Your Honor, my client is the biological mother of Hope Mitchell and has been her primary caregiver since birth. There is no evidence of abuse, neglect, or any other factor that would justify removing a child from her parent. The petitioner's arguments are based on bias and speculation, not facts. The respondent has served her country with extraordinary distinction, Jennifer continued. She has arranged her career to prioritize her daughter. She has a strong support network of fellow service members and their families. Every expert who has actually evaluated her has found her to be an excellent mother. The petitioner's case is not about Hope's welfare. It is about their personal prejudices against military mothers. Judge Rodriguez nodded. Very well. Mr. Winters, you may call your first witness. The morning session was brutal. The Thompsons' lawyers called a parade of witnesses, each one designed to chip away at Sarah's image. A child psychologist testified about the theoretical risks of having a parent with combat experience. A social worker discussed the challenges of single-parent households. A former neighbor of Sarah's said she had heard arguments coming from Sarah's apartment late at night. Jennifer cross-examined each witness effectively, exposing the weaknesses in their arguments. The psychologist admitted he had never actually evaluated Sarah. The social worker acknowledged that Sarah's support network was stronger than most two-parent households. The neighbor admitted she had only heard Sarah's voice during the alleged arguments, suggesting Sarah had been on the phone rather than fighting with anyone. But the damage was cumulative. Each witness planted a seed of doubt, a question about whether Sarah was really as fit a mother as she claimed to be. By the time the court broke for lunch, Sarah felt like she had been through a boxing match. How bad is it? She asked Jennifer as they left the courtroom. Not great, but not fatal either, Jennifer replied. Their case is weak, but they are making noise. The question is whether Judge Rodriguez sees through it. What about Hartford? Are you going to meet him? Jennifer checked her watch. I have 30 minutes. I will head over there now. You should get something to eat, try to relax. Sarah nodded, though relaxing seemed impossible. Be careful. I do not trust him. Neither do I. But, if he has something useful, we need it. Jennifer left, and Sarah found a quiet corner of the courthouse cafeteria to wait. She tried to eat a sandwich but could barely taste it. Her mind kept spinning through scenarios, possibilities, fears. What if they lost? What if Hope was taken away again? What if all her fighting had been for nothing? Her phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer, he has something big. Evidence of financial fraud. The Thompsons have been hiding assets. This could change everything. Sarah stared at the message, trying to process what it meant. Financial fraud was serious, but how did it relate to the custody case? Another text arrived, Hartford says the money is dirty. Offshore accounts, tax evasion, possibly connections to organized crime. He has documents. He wants immunity in exchange for testimony. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. If the Thompsons were involved in illegal activity, it changed everything. No court would award custody to grandparents who were potential criminals. But, could Hartford be trusted? Was this some kind of trap? Bring him in, Sarah texted back. Whatever it takes. The afternoon session began with a surprise. Jennifer entered the courtroom not alone, but with William Hartford at her side. The Thompsons' new lawyers immediately objected, demanding to know what was happening. Richard Thompson's face went pale when he saw his former attorney sitting on the opposite side of the courtroom. Judge Rodriguez called for order. Ms. Collins, would you care to explain? Your Honor, we have a new witness to call. William Hartford, formerly counsel for the petitioners, has come forward with evidence directly relevant to this case. He is prepared to testify under oath about matters that he believes the court needs to know. Gregory Winters was on his feet instantly. Objection. This is highly irregular. Mr. Hartford is bound by attorney-client privilege. Any testimony he gives would be a violation of legal ethics. Mr. Hartford has waived the privilege concern, Jennifer replied smoothly. He is prepared to invoke the crime-fraud exception, which allows disclosure of attorney-client communications when those communications involve ongoing or planned illegal activity. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Rodriguez banged her gavel. Order. Mr.